Hello everyone, my name's Jake, the Swaggy Snake, and today I will be talking about why I like the Sleep Deprived podcast. Now I know if you go to their comment section, you might believe that this is the worst podcast in existence. However, I believe that's everyone being ironic, or at least I hope so, because this podcast is fantastic. Now, what got me into this podcast? Well, simply put, I was watching Schlatt, and then a Sleep Deprived podcast video was recommended to me via, YouTube recommendations, with Schlatt in the thumbnail. And the thing is, I knew Schlatt did the Chuckle Sandwich podcast, but that did not interest me, because frankly, I'm not a podcast type of person. I never found the appeal of them, and I much preferred either actual YouTube videos or music for my entertainment. But for whatever reason, this piqued my interest, and I chose to watch it. Not only did I watch it, I binged it, and I spent the course of several days watching multiple episodes, so much so, every highlight was already fresh in my mind. So what's so special about the podcast? What made me want to binge it? What led me to subscribing to the Sleep Deprived podcast with notifications on? The answer is that these four YouTubers who make up the podcast, Jay Schlatt, Astro, Mika, and a Panda, well, they're just not special. Yeah, they crack a few jokes, make fun of landlords and rentoids, and they do train a lot. And I mean, they do a lot of training, but none of that is special. Everyone can, does, or can do it. The difference here is that it doesn't feel forced. This is especially noticeable considering that these guys don't really advertise their podcast all too much, at least on their YouTube channels, as they're only listed in their channels tab and for a Panda in the top of his description on his latest video. And if they were to advertise on Twitter, that's beyond me. I like myself enough not to have a Twitter account. I just stumbled upon it by accident. And, well, I enjoyed the casual vibe the podcast has. I think the fact that it was hidden in plain sight for so long was something that did add appeal of the podcast for me, because I think I found it around 100k subs or something of that sort. I just stumbled upon it and it wasn't forced in my face. The podcast, when it's presented, it feels like some people wanting to make a podcast rather than a YouTuber trying to get more watch time and get more ad revenue from me. And I think that's the appeal of the podcast, is that it doesn't feel like they're trying to just get you to watch it for money. Even though that's an important part, it doesn't feel like the main part. And another aspect that makes the podcast so appealing is their conversations. The conversations they have feel genuine. It's like a good old group of friends just chatting, with the ums, yas, and uhs. The group just feels real, however cringy that sounds. And just because I want to get this out of the way, no, I'm not vicariously living a life or a friendship with these people on this podcast and substituting that with a real friendship. I fully understand that these four people are strangers to me, and they just get on the podcast for entertainment purposes, and that me making this video will not get me a friendship with them or, anything of that sort, and nor do I want it. I just want to share my appreciations of the podcast with this video and not try to become some friend group with these people. I see the podcast as something that pops into my feed whenever it happens and think, oh cool, another episode. I get to watch it soon. It's essentially a weekly TV series for me. Anyways, with that clarification out of the way, the podcast has some serious conversations every now and again. Schlatt's ramble on the podcast being demonetized unfairly and the struggle of paying their employees what they deserve, to investing $300 million of lottery winnings into a 1% bank fund to get $3 million a year for the rest of your life guaranteed. Though my understanding of this may be flawed. To the absolute silly moments of a Panda going boo-hoo to people getting bombed and not reaching their bunker in time. Okay, maybe that was a bad example. A better one, though, is when they brought on Obama, Joe Biden, Joe Rogan, and Donald Trump onto the podcast to talk with. That episode in particular put me in a good mood for the entire day with how funny it was. But the fact that the podcast, while having a primarily funny focused, still has some serious topics and discussions mentioned in the podcast, it adds a whole surprise element to the podcast, where even though comedy is the main forefront, its shifting to a serious subject matter doesn't throw off the podcast vibe at all. Plus, that's just the podcast part of their channel. They have gaming content, where they, as you may have guessed, play video games. Who would have thought? But nothing they do feels forced or overdramatic for the sake of funniness or the sake to keep viewer attention. Especially in their Mario Party videos. Once, Mika was not able to hold back from swearing at a Panda when he stole a star from him, and Schlatt lost it when he needed to roll a 2 to get a star and only rolled a 1. Though, when both of these people had a little outburst, it didn't feel forced or played up for a bit. It felt genuine and natural, which adds to the appeal of the podcast as a whole. And this is just their Mario Party videos. They play Skyblock, Roblox, GTA 5, and many more games that all share the same vibe. But they're different enough to be memorable in their own right. Overall, the Sleep Deprived podcast is not a good podcast. It's a phenomenal podcast. Not because it tries to be special, but because it just has 4 people who are naturally entertaining and don't try to be special for the sake of views and money, but to make an entertaining podcast. And this is just a site that isn't behind a paywall. If you do sign up to the Sleep Deprived Patreon, you get another 30 minutes of the podcast, a Discord server, and a Minecraft server, all for the low cost of $5. Of which I will not be paying because 1, I'm not actually a real fan, and 2, I'm scared of buyer's remorse. Anyways, if any of my 42 subscribers hasn't subscribed to the Sleep Deprived podcast YouTube channel, go ahead and do so. It's quality entertainment at no cost to you, and there's no point in me describing what they're doing over there when you can experience it yourself and get a better experience than what I've explained. Anyways, I've been Jake, the Swaggy Snake. Hopefully this video didn't come across as too cringe, and thanks for watching.